We are here with Paul Andersen, who's going to kick off the next session. And for those of you who don't know Paul, he's an amazing teacher. He's an amazing expert on NGSS. He has an amazing set of resources and a YouTube channel. We'll post your YouTube link here. Bozeman Science, is the channel still called Bozeman Science, Paul?
Yeah, it is. I put all my NGSS stuff on Wonder of Science. That's what I'm going to talk about today. But yeah, on YouTube, it's Bozeman Science.
Great. If you haven't subscribed to that, you should check it out. It is fantastic set of resources. And Paul, this is great. We're excited to hear you. I will stay on the sidelines if you need me, and I'll pop back in 20 minutes for Q&A.
Awesome, Dave. I'm gonna do presenter mode for about 10, and if you don't mind, I'd love to do a little mini lesson if you don't mind being a student. So kind of be on the ready. Maybe you and Clifton, if you don't mind, like 10 minutes or so from now. Does that sound cool?
I would love to be your student. That would be fantastic.
Okay, cool. Awesome, very good. So thanks Dave for that, and thanks for all the love from the chat. It's really nice to see that. I'm here in Bozeman, which is snowy Bozeman. So I'm gonna get started by sharing my screen. Hopefully in the chat you're seeing, I always get lost when I launch something in Zoom. So hopefully in chat you're seeing cause and effect, and I'm just gonna start my presentation right now. So hopefully you're seeing performance assessments for learning. That's what I'm gonna talk about today. So thanks for tuning in on a Saturday. I know that's always tough, but to kind of get started today, I'm gonna start talking about assessments, and so performance assessments. And before I do that, I should really define what assessments are, because I reached out to a lot of teachers, and I think everybody has different definitions for what assessments are. For me, assessments are essentially evidence of student learning. So if I were to tell you there are 3 types of assessments: summative assessments, formative assessments, but then I were to say, like in the chat, what is the 3rd type of assessments? Like that would technically be an assessment. An assessment is when I'm asking you to show me what you know and also to show me what you're learning. And so I'll circle back to that in just a bit. But today I want to start with a quote from Lenin, and it's a weird way to start a presentation, but what he said is there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. And I feel like we're in one of those positions right now. A lot of things that I've been talking about as far as changes in the classroom that we hope to see, as horrible as COVID is, we're starting to see a lot of those things happening right now. So I'm not in the classroom. I've been out of the classroom working with schools implementing NGSS for the last 6 years, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I always want to ask teachers like what's working and what's not working. So I put this up on social media, and it was essentially assessments during the pandemic, like what's working and what's not working. And so I got a bunch of posts from people that I really respect, and these are some of the people here. But one thing that really resonated with me was from Jeff Yap. He's a physics chem teacher in physics, and he said, due dates and late penalties are not working. Closed notes tests are not working. Open-ended responses and claim evidence reasoning are better at representing learning. And so like to essentially kind of get to the point is, I think all those things that haven't worked in the past, like high stakes paper and pencil multiple choice tests, just don't work in a hybrid or a remote setting, because kids will just cheat. And so we don't get a really good understanding of what they know. And so we're having to pivot, and a lot of that pivoting is going in a good direction. So when I went through all the social media, what I saw was, these are kind of the big things that came to the top. Claim evidence reasoning, but also giving kids a chance to show what they know with the video. Flipgrid is really popular with teachers as a way to do that. Giving them open note tests, group tests, way more formative tests to figure out what kids are knowing and what they're doing. And then retakes and project-based learning. These are all really, really good things. This is good pedagogy. And when we go back to the classroom, we have to start using that. If you don't know what claim evidence reasoning is, it's something that it's a way to construct an argument, and I'll dig more into it in just a second. So today, when I thought about the title, we always jump to learning. And so we always jump to, let's figure out what the kids need to learn. How am I going to teach them that? If you've been in education as long as I have, you know that's not the first step. The first step you should always look at is, what's the assessment? How am I going to, at the end, figure out where kids are going? And then I have to figure out what standards am I using? And so what are those performance standards, and how are those going to build Once we know what those standards are, I'll mostly talk about NGSS. How do we build assessments? And then how do we build the learning? I really love Neil deGrasse Tyson. The one thing I would push back on him today is he said our standards don't teach like these inquiry skills of thinking. Like he hasn't looked at the next generation science standards. I would encourage him to learn that, because like these have been out there for almost a decade, and that's what we should use to guide what we're doing. So like backward design, what we need to do is figure out where are we going to go, then how are we going to know if the kids get there, and then how are we going to build the learning to get them to that point. And so the reason we don't do backward design, it's been around for 40 years. I was a science teacher for 20 of those years. It's because we don't have time. Like who has time when you're trying to teach to actually build authentic performance assessments and then move in that direction? And so what I want to share with you today is over the last 3 years, I've been writing assessments and a bunch of other teachers have been writing performance assessments, and they just don't get used on my website. So I want to show you where they are, so all of you know how you can get assessments right now for what you're teaching at this moment. The next thing I want to do is show you a checklist that I made with some teachers in New York as a way to look at an assessment and say what's right with it and what's wrong and how can I improve it. And I want you to look at my assessments as well and say what's good, what's bad, and then how can we fix that. And then the one thing I want to add in the second half of this session is the idea of a mini lesson. A mini lesson is a way to teach the concepts that we're trying to get at. If you don't know what claim evidence and reasoning is, there's no way your kids could do that. And so I'm going to show you how you could use a mini lesson to teach them these practices and concepts. And then the last thing is I have a huge announcement at the end. I'm doing, I'll just get to it. So that's a good teaser, I guess, is what we talk about. And so let's first talk about what an assessment might look like. This one's on ecosystems, and I'm grabbing one from the New York State exam. So they have a statewide exam. And so this is what a typical assessment, I'm talking about a summative assessment, might look like. So what do we have here is multiple choice questions on the left side, and then we've got summit application that looks like a food web on this side. I'm not saying this horrible, but it was written in 2018, and it's really just a one-dimensional assessment. It's just getting at the content that the kids have to know. And so what I've developed is a performance assessment screener. I'll show you and give you a link to it so you can look at it. And I've got a video, of course, that talks through. But basically, you take an assessment, you then reflect on it. What do you like? What do you not like? I actually like some of the questions on this one. But then you go through and use this checklist. It's a way to see, like, does it have content? Does it have practices? Does it have cross-cutting concepts? And so when I screened this assessment from New York using my screener, it screened like 1.5 out of 7. And so what does that mean? It's not a great performance assessment. It's an assessment of content knowledge, but it's not going to be an assessment of their ability to do science. And so if the kids, if you're aiming for this, the kids aren't going to get authentic science. I want to show you a better assessment. And this is an assessment that literally like changed my life. I don't know, the first time I saw it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I saw somebody already linked it up in the chat, but this comes from SNAP, which is the Stanford Next Generation Assessment Project. It's an incredible project. They offer a course that you could take online, and it shows you what a good assessment is and how to develop an assessment of your own. This one's called the Deer Population Assessment, and I'll add a link to all these things at the end so you can get to it. I would encourage you to take it. Spend 15 minutes just taking this assessment before you kind of reflect on it. But it's essentially something's happened to the deer in Colorado. So their population has dropped off. So that's the phenomena that you start with. The kids are asked to like reflect on this a little bit. What do you notice is going on? But then the big thing that they do, let me show you the two prompts on the assessment that jumped out to me as like, oh, wow, this is really, really good. First thing they did is they said, we're going to show you a bunch of data sets. I want you to look for patterns that you see in these data sets. And then they give you all these data sets. Let me show you what some of those are. They're going to be rainfall in Colorado. Then they show them like an invasive cheatgrass, what's happening to the elk population, like how are the fawns dying? Is it starvation or predation? So then they give them a bunch of data and say, what patterns do you see? And then the next thing is make a claim with evidence and reasoning as what might be happening to the deer. Now, when you look at the answers to this, and I'll include rubrics and student works in links as well, you get a really good assessment. And there's no right answer. It's hard to Google the right answer because there's so many different answers. You could make arguments about the invasive or about the water, and all of that is contained there. And so I've seen people say, wow, in the chat, like, this is what a good performance assessment looks like. And so if I use the performance assessment screening tool like this, how does it screen? Like, number one, it screens really high. The only thing that I would improve on this assessment is some of their language is weak. They're saying, look at the graphs versus analyze the graphs. And what do you think versus interpret? So like, this is a solid assessment. And so once I looked at this assessment, it got me going down this path of what a good performance assessments look like. It led to the screening tool that I'm using. And so like, what does it show you? It shows you that assessments can be really good. They interview these 3 middle school girls after they've taken this assessment. And what do they say? That was really fun. I didn't know you could learn on a test. Like I felt like it's a scientist when I was doing that. And so the reason why our classes sometimes focus on content is because our assessments is focus on content. And so we have to have an assessment that has these 3 dimensions. What are they going to learn? What are they going to do? And then how are they going to think? And so what I've been doing ever since is building this website called The Wonder of Science, where we're curating assessments that I've written and other teachers have written. And so don't do it now, but if you go to The Wonder of Science and click on this assessment button, what you're going to get is this page. It's a page that I wish more teachers could go to. And I probably have to design the website in a different way, but it's essentially, here's the screening tool. There's a video of me and another teacher, Lisa Brosnick, who helped develop this screening tool. You could watch us go through and use the screening tool. It's got assessments all the way from kindergarten through high school. So if we click on it, you could click on, let's say I'm middle school, I'm doing the atomic composition model. Then there's going to be an assessment that I wrote on increasing mass of burning steel wool, and then a bunch of other assessments that teachers have written. These, you should not use these as tests. They're on the internet. Kids will find them on the internet. If you use them as a high stakes test, like kids will cheat and find that. I just want to show you where these are. And I've seen a lot of things in the chat about what about K through 5? That's what I've done over the last year. So there are 67 standards, kindergarten through grade 5, and I've written 1 assessment for each one of those standards. It's taken me hours and hours and hours. I'm not an elementary teacher, but at least we have some starting points. So there's hundreds of assessments there and they cover all the standards. So what I would encourage you to do is go there and start looking at those assessments to build your understanding. Somebody's saying like, are you giving to this to us for free? Of course. Like that's how the internet should work. I've made them so they're available to you. They're under Creative Commons. You just can't sell them. That's all I'm kind of asking. And so I wanted to share that resource with you, and hopefully you can share it with other teachers. They're not exemplar yet. Like my goal is to get exemplar assessments, and then eventually to get student work and rubrics built around all of these so we can actually get us going in the right direction. And so that's half of my presentation. And the next half, what I want to talk about is how do we, once we know where we're going, like how do we get our kids there? And so what I want to introduce to you is the idea of a mini lesson. If you're teaching kids the content, the students should learn that through the phenomena itself. But if you're teaching them how to do an argument through claim evidence reasoning, they'll never learn that on their own. You have to do mini lessons to teach them that. Or cross-cutting concepts are just as important. So they'll never learn how to think about science unless we show them how to think about science. And so mini lessons is a word that I hope spreads like wildfire through the science education community. It's a powerful tool. I'm stealing it from the elementary teachers, and I want to kind of model that with you and show you how you could use a mini lesson. So the mini lesson I'm going to do right now, Dave and Clifton, do you guys mind turning your video on and unmuting? Do you guys mind being my students for a second?
Would love to.
No,
okay,
no
cool.
hard questions.
No way. And so it should be when we go through this, Dave, a mini lesson shouldn't be about confusing to kids or tricking them up with a phenomena. It should be straight, explicit instruction. So don't worry. I'm going to hold your hand, Dave, through this whole thing.
Okay.
You ready to go? Okay, cool. So like step 1, and this works in remote teaching. I've done this with elementary through high school, little mini lessons like this. So are you guys familiar with cause and effect, Dave and Clifton, those terms?
Sure.
You know what cause and effect are? You guys are good? Okay, cool. So we're going to start with this. So I've got a little block here, and what I'm going to do is just go like that. Okay. So we're going to use a real concrete example to get started. So could you describe the events that you just saw, Dave? What did you just see?
Well, the force from your finger toppled the block.
Okay, so let's break those into the events. So I pushed it with my finger. Is that what you said? Force by the finger?
And the block fell over, toppled or fell over.
Okay. I'm going to call it finger force as an event, and then toppling block. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
As the effect.
Cool. So if I put these out, like for some kids, they will have a hard time knowing which is the cause and which is the effect. So like I always start by just writing what the events are. So I heard you say there's a toppling block and then there's a finger force, or it's hard to read. Which of those is the cause and which is the effect then, Dave?
Well, I was going to say that the finger is the cause and the
Okay.
toppling is the effect.
Gotcha. And if kids don't know how to do that, you can show them how, like, which makes most sense. Was there a toppling block and then a finger force, or vice versa, like putting them in order and then saying, you did great. Like, Dave, I want you to have high confidence now. Like, that's the cause and that would be the effect. Clifton's super smart and would say, like, but then there was a sound. And
Yeah.
so maybe the toppling block led to, I don't know, Clifton, were you going to add on other events?
No, I think that sums up the example.
Now, what I've found is when I work with kindergarten kids, their understanding of cause and effect is about the same as high school kids. Like, no one's teaching them cause and effect through the whole school. So I'll have biology kids who can't tell you the difference between a cause and effect. And that's just terrifying. So like, you have to do mini lessons around this. So let's start with a harder one. I'm gonna pick on Clifton now. Is that okay, Clifton?
Please.
So what we've got here is, I've got a little block here. So it's just a wooden cube. And so what I want you to do is watch. I'm gonna just tell you that that will be the cause. So this is gonna be the root cause. So let's watch this, Clifton. So what would the effect be then, Clifton?
The effect is the green ball popping or rolling out from behind the that white cover.
Perfect. Awesome. Now you're doing great. Like, don't be nervous. You guys are killing it. This is really good. So what I'm going to introduce now is the idea of a mechanism. Are you both familiar with that term, mechanism?
Yes.
All right. Like, cause, mechanism, and effect. If you're going to do a mini lesson, any science teacher out there, this is the first one to start with. Kids don't know sometimes what a cause is or what an effect is, and a lot of the time they don't know the mechanism. So Clifton, what do you think's back here? Like, I hid it from you. What do you think the mechanism is? Do you want to watch it again?
Yes, please.
Let's watch it again. So what do you think the mechanism is?
I'm guessing like kind of like domino. Some other blocks set up, and then you push over one, and then it's like the domino effect. It pushes over maybe another one.
What about you, Dave? Dave, what are you thinking?
Yeah, there's some kind of Rube Goldberg machine behind there. That's
perfect.
You know, a ball's popping out when you drop it in the top.
Now, I would say, like, in science, what do we try to do? Figure out what's back here. Like, if we're looking at the deer population in Colorado, we could let's just see what's back here. So like, if we look at the deer population in Colorado, like there is a weird thing that went on. And Clifton, you would probably change your mechanism a little bit. Like, that looked weird when that happened. But the idea is, like, we don't get to see this in science all the time. Like, we get to see the cause, sometimes the effect, but we don't get to see what's in the middle. And so like, that's a mini lesson. You just had a mini lesson on cause, mechanism, and effect. And so what you have to do with every one of these is you have to build little mini lessons to teach them what cause, mechanism, and effect is, so that when they're working on it, they can say like, oh, oops, I dropped my AirPod in my pocket. That's awesome. So like, you have to give them concrete examples so that when we're working through the phenomena, then you can say, remember, when we were looking at that domino effect, how did this affect that, affect that? Does that make sense, Clifton and Dave?
Totally.
Next, I would go to like let's get to an actual phenomena with a concrete example. So I've got two blocks here. So this is normal block. So this is green, normal block. And then I've got orange block. And so orange block falls over and green block always stands upright. Does that make sense, Dave, Clifton?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the cause of that is, Dave?
Well, the center of gravity is over, you know, tilted over from the bottom of the orange one. It falls over, and the green one.
Perfect.
Since we saw magnets, magical magnets, maybe the green one's magnetic.
Gotcha. Could you help me tease that apart into what your cause is? What is the root cause, Dave, and what's the mechanism? Because you said a lot of things in there, but could you articulate what is the root cause, of the orange one falling over, and what would be the mechanism? Help us out on that.
What's unstable because the center of gravity is outside of the base of the block.
That would be the cause. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, when you ask that, the cause is gravity.
Okay. All right. Yeah. But I think this conversation, can you see we can have a way deeper conversation now that we've introduced the idea of cause, mechanism, and effect. And also, like, it also doesn't fall over too, Dave. So like sometimes it falls over and then sometimes it doesn't.
You're
fall
tricky.
Over.
Yeah.
I know.
So maybe my hypothesis was wrong. Maybe the center of gravity is fine.
So then we would want to like work on our mechanism. Is that what you're saying? Or it has to be a more complex mechanism?
It must be more complex.
Yeah. What do you think, Clifton? Like, why does the orange one sometimes fall over and then sometimes like not fall over?
Was it completely at rest, or did it? Was it completely stationary when you release your hand, or?
Really good. Yeah, like this is what a really fun science classroom should look like. Me not telling you the answer, but like us digging into the science itself. So like the biggest movement in really good science education has been argumentation through claim evidence reasoning. Teachers are playing around with claim evidence reasoning. I've got a video out there to watch it. Why are kids struggling with claim evidence reasoning? We're not doing many lessons on cause, mechanism, and effect. Because we would want to do a bunch of experiments on this, right, Dave and Clifton? Like we want to play with the orange block so that we can eventually make claims about the cause. And we would want reasoning that has both the effect and the mechanism in it. And then all of this middle part, the evidence would be, let me weigh it, let me float it, let me rattle it, let me play with it, let me do all these other things so I can gather evidence so I can make a plausible claim. So like the one thing when you were talking, Dave, earlier, I think it was during Neil's thing, was like, how do we teach concepts? This is how we teach concepts, with concrete manipulatives, so we can teach these abstract skills. What am I not including here? Like this could be an ecosystem, or it could be a gene, or this could be like a faulty circuit. Like all of this is like, now we can talk about these really abstract terms just with a really concrete example, something like wooden blocks like this. So I know I've kind of gone over probably in time, but thank you, Dave, and thank you, Clifton, for being my student. It's always a pleasure to see both of you.
Yeah. Well, can I ask a follow-up question on your cause and effect?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cliff, help me with the Q&A. We have 7 minutes for the Q&A. Let's actually, Paul, you tricked us. I wasn't watching the clock. That was so interesting.
I know, that's good.
You could have kept me on for another 30 minutes.
Can I plug two things before we go?
Please.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is this showing up for you, Clifton and Dave, announcement?
Yes.
Okay, on my website, I'm putting up a bunch of little mini lessons. This is my passion project right now, building little blocks like this and building little mini lessons. I'm just getting started down this path. So I've got one on cause and effect. I'm gonna use Edpuzzle to do these. Dave's gonna send links out and I'll put links out as well so you can get to these. So this is what I'm working on now, just these mini lessons and what they'll look like. I'm trying to build them so like in each of these areas, they'll have like ascending vertical ones. So you start with like cause and effect and then work towards cause, mechanism, and effect. The other announcement though is like, I learned by teaching. This is how I learned to do this. And so I'm doing a bunch of training in November. And so I have a website called My Learning Spot. You can go there right now and register for training so we can dig in deeper. So I'll do like a 2-hour training on performance assessments, a 2-hour training on causation, a 2-hour training on systems and patterns. So these are going to be Zoom conferences that we really dig in, and I limit the number of people who are there so we can have kind of what Dave, Clifton, and I are having, like a really authentic conversation around these things with smaller numbers. So I did want to plug those. Last time I was at a Science is Cool conference, those things filled up so fast. And so if you're interested in that, that's My Learning Spot. And I've just got training there. I think almost all of them are in November, so you can come check those out if you want to dig in deeper with me. But sorry, Dave, I wanted to get that in for sure.
No, that's great. And I see people putting the links there. And we will share the links with everybody who's here. We're going to share the links and we'll send this out later. So don't worry about that. Yeah, Paul, there's this is great, by the way. You know, there's a lot of people asking, there's not enough time with you. So they can get more time with you by following following these links and going to.
Yeah. So if you go to my learning spot, I and some other teachers are doing just like low cost trainings like this. So I'm charging $25 and it's 2 hours, and then we're limiting the number. So it's pretty authentic. It's just, you get my time then. And it's also ways that I can play around with these things. I can do more mini lessons and see, well, that didn't work, or that worked, and get feedback from other teachers. So yeah, it's all on a website called My Learning Spot. There's some other teachers that and I are doing that. Just a way to, during this time, like give back to other teachers, just like through these little workshops like this.
Now the assessment page and link you showed earlier, that's open and free for people to use, and
Totally free and available for teachers to use. It's called At the Wonder of Science, and so it's just like, if you go to the Wonder of Science, there's a link there for assessments, and then it's just by standard. So the whole website is organized by standard. So you just click on, like the Clifton, you were talking about one on the moon, or not the moon rather, but like seasons today. So then you could look at an assessment, a performance assessment, and figure out, okay, what do the kids really have to do to hit that standard? The whole website is organized by standard. So don't try to just look for an assessment. Find the standard you're trying to teach first and the grade level, because if you drift outside of that, you're going to not be grade appropriate to your kids. And so like, find the right one, find the assessment, and then use that to guide the learning that you're doing. Yeah, does that help, Dave?
Yeah, Paul, and there was a question. It was from somebody from the Stanislaus County Office of Education. They were saying, can we, I think they wanted to link to it, right?
Of course, yeah. Everything on the website is Creative Commons. Yeah, the only thing you can't do is just sell it. That's it. So like, use it, copy it, modify it, do whatever you want to all those assessments.
And attribute
That's the point.
And attribute.
Yeah, you should give attribution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's at the bottom of each of those, there's a list, there's a link to the actual license that it's used in, but that's the intent, is to make us better teachers by giving us better assessments. It's really been a passion project. These two things I'm holding in two hands, but there's like me working on assessments and a bunch of other teachers working on assessments that we're sharing. And the other one now is like, how do we build mini lessons to get kids to this better understanding? And that, I think, is like my passion project now. That's what I'm really interested in.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the claim mechanism, cause mechanism effect?
Mechanism and effect, yeah.
Yeah, so I think very related, but different terminology that we think about a lot is like correlation versus causality.
Yep.
And it's really tough, like a lot of us are looking at like COVID data, and it can be correlated to things that we're doing, or is it caused by things that we're like policies or opening up?
So yeah, Clifton, not to talk over you, but yeah, can I jump in for a second? Yeah. So like, all of this is in the NGSS standards. When they wrote them out, they have vertical progressions at each grade level. What should they do? So like, in my workshop on causation that I'm going to do, there's going to be a lesson on cause and effect, cause mechanism effect, but there'll also be one on correlation versus causation. So like, I have 7 little lessons that build a better understanding of causation, and that idea of correlation is just one of those. I think the big thing, Clifton, is like, who cares if they can remember what mitosis or meiosis is? We want a society where they can look at evidence and make valid claims with reasoning. All I want is just kids, when they see a data set or somebody on the internet or on a TV show make a claim, just say, I hear your claim. What evidence do you have? What reasoning do you have? What's the mechanism that this evidence is for? We just want them to be like really good members of society and deliver that really good inquiry science to everybody else. So hey, I'm probably over on time, Dave.
No, that's okay. We get a minute or two. We'll go a minute or two into the break. This is super interesting. I don't know if you were. I saw you were on this morning with.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing. Yeah, I'm a nerd. Well, yeah, I'm a science major.
Neil said something that struck me when he said it, and I want to go back and re-listen to it. But he was saying that wisdom is what you have left after you've forgotten all the knowledge you learned in school. Yep. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Like, we call those in education, we call them enduring understanding. So what do you have? I always describe it as 10 years later, 5 years later, you know what I mean? And this is one of those. Like, I want them to look for evidence and use that evidence to make claims with reasoning. I thought it was really important what he had to say. The only pushback, like I said, is I don't think he understands the NGSS fully. And I think Neil has to, if he really were to dig into it, I don't know him, but Dave does. Like if he were to look into it, he said he wanted to be a learner, he would see everything he's asking us to bring to our classrooms there. It's just teachers are really busy and lots of times we fall back on the way we've taught in the past. Again, he's an inspiration to all of us. And like, I loved what he also said about you can't be both productive and creative. That resonated with me a ton as well.
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
But you know, so I when I was listening to him, I got that sense too that he's not up to speed on NGSS.
Yep.
And now he is, but he's a phenomenal communicator. I mean, that's his gift, is right, communicating. And you know, I will figure out how to connect you and him, because I think you should be. My understanding is he's writing a book on this, on education.
I would love to Zoom. Yeah, because I'm not saying he's not interested in it. I think he would probably have so many things coming at him, but like, I think he's a really good collaborator. I think he's a really good teacher, but like a big loop of teaching is getting feedback from the learners and then adjusting your teaching based on that. So that would be my one piece of feedback is I think you haven't quite dug into the other dimensions and how it's really going on in classrooms right now, and you won't see it in society for a few years. Like it's gonna take a while before he starts to see those students that are coming out of classrooms like that. So yeah, I think, yeah, we need as many voices as we possibly can out there, and he is a really solid voice.